Hi everyone. Welcome to this self-knowledge course. Today we will see topic 19 of this course for the awakening of consciousness. This topic is titled, States and Events. And it is very interesting. Because it will help us learn to live intelligently, by learning to correctly combine external events, which are all the circumstances that happen to us at all times, in our daily lives, with an adequate internal state. And let's start this topic by analyzing the different contrasts that we can commonly see in life, and that are really surprising. Because if we analyze them, we can understand how many times external appearances do not correspond to what is being experienced internally. For example, in life we can see very rich people, who have all the luxuries that other people can only wish for, who have mansions, lots of money, beautiful families, etc. However, they can, even having all that, suffer terribly from worries, illnesses, heartbreaks, betrayals, losses, impotence problems, or because, although they have it all, they continue to have the same existential void that has not been filled, because it cannot be filled with money, luxuries, prestige, or fame. We have seen the case of singers, or famous actors, or people with great social power, who suffer, the same as any common person, from the terrible scourge of depression. Some have even ended up committing suicide. And it is surprising, because whoever has not achieved in his life the things that these people have achieved, thinks that his sadness, his dissatisfaction, his existential emptiness will be healed or filled if he achieves this or that. That he will achieve happiness if he gets a better job, if he gets a lot of money, or if he gets fame. And it is not like that. We do not understand that happiness never comes from external circumstances, but from a correct internal state. In contrast, we can find people who have very little, who do not meet the requirements of what is socially understood as being successful, but who can live happily, who smile constantly, who truly enjoy the little details of life. And that is, because we must understand that happiness does not depend on the external events, but on our internal state. So, let's dig a little deeper, so we can understand the differences between external events and internal states, and how we can learn to combine them properly. What is an event? Events are all the situations that happen to us externally. For example, several events can happen to us in one day: breakfast with the family, going to work, lunch with co-workers, having to stand in line at the bank, argument with the couple, etc. And even, on any given day, we could experience really intense events, such as being assaulted, losing a loved one, getting into an accident, etc. And if we are going to talk about our own life to someone, then we would talk about it as a succession of different events, such as the different events we lived when we were children, and about our graduation, our wedding day, the birth of a child, etc. We include in our stories names and surnames, dates, places, etc. But that is not the whole story, since we commonly omit the internal aspect, the state of mind, or inner state, that we had in those events, which usually truly defines the quality of that lived event. Then, what is an inner state? An inner state is the state of mind or the mood that we have in front of an event. We must point out that events are exterior, while states are interior, but that these are a fundamental part of an event, because they are the ones that will determine how we experience that event. We can see that in the same event, for example, a party, not everyone has the same mood. Some will be happy, others will be bored, others will be worried, etc. Therefore, everyone will experience the same event in a totally different way. So, the important thing is to learn to have a conscious inner state in the face of the different events that we have to experience, so we can live them in conscious way and drag the wisdom that every experience has to give us. That is why it is important that we learn to correctly combine states and events. But it is interesting to note that there are certain ways in which we commonly incorrectly combine states and events. For example, many times, we have interior states that, although they seem to correspond to the event that is being experienced, are actually totally out of control. Like when in a funeral we see a person who feels totally devastated, who cries inconsolably, who screams, who wants to die. On the other hand, a person at a celebration gets drunk, gets up to dance on the table and gets out of control. Not knowing how to control our internal states prevents us from experiencing different events consciously. Other times our internal states definitely do not correspond to the external event. Like the person who cries in the middle of a party, or the one who laughs and makes jokes at a funeral. If we analyze it, we can begin to understand that having an incorrect state before a certain event, whether it seems to correspond to the event or not, is what brings us so many complicated situations. And it is the reason why we can never get out really the best of each situation, and that we cannot rescue the respective hidden learning in each event. We also see that sometimes, long-awaited events when they arrived, we felt that something was missing. Like the person who was looking forward to her wedding day so much, and was making so many preparations to make it a perfect and magical event. And at the precise moment of the event, she was so worried about the details, the people, the cooks that were late, or the musicians that did not play the songs that she wanted, that the event, instead of the magical and special moment that she expected it to be, simply became a tedious, and even annoying event for her. Other times it happens that things that are not planned, but when they occur, having an adequate internal state in us, are very pleasant and beneficial. But we can also see that many times, the event can be directly caused by the inner state that the person has. Like when we have a bad attitude, and with that attitude, we make every event that we must experience that day bitter. And we cause very unpleasant events to happen. In a given situation, the event that represents the death of a person may occur because the person didn't know how to modify his continuous internal state of sadness and depression. Or because in a given situation, the person didn't know how to modify a strong internal state of anger and violence, and killed another or had himself killed. Or the event, which was meeting such a person who became our partner, it could have happened because of the specific inner state we were in at that time, perhaps a state of lust or loneliness. And this is interesting to observe, because we can see how the psychological defects that we carry inside are the ones that manipulate us, leading us to have wrong internal states, and leading us to act in one way or another, in the face of different events. We have no control over ourselves. Being in control is different. When we learn not to let our psychological defects take us from one inner state to another by practicing psychological death at all times, and we allow our consciousness to manifest itself in us in each event that we have to live, then we will be on the way to becoming wise. The wise can be cheerful, but never ever full of crazy frenzy. Sad, but never hopeless and downcast. The wise will be serene in the midst of violence. Abstemious in the orgy. Will remain chaste among lust, etc. And to achieve this state of self-control, it is necessary that we learn to correctly combine internal states with external events, since it is the only way to live intelligently. So, how can we correctly combine states and events? Let's see the steps to achieve it. The first thing will always be to practice self-observation in the face of any event, in any circumstance in life. Because only by directing our attention inwards, can we discover the internal state in which we find ourselves, and the psychological defects that are causing that internal state. By self-observing, we can discover if we are anxious, or excited, sad, or angry. Let's remember that we can only change within ourselves what we can observe and understand. The next thing will be to become aware of the event that we are going to experience, or that we are experiencing, and then make a logical confrontation, analyzing if the inner state we have is adequate for that event. We will see when doing this exercise that a correct internal state in the face of any event always implies staying focused, living in the present moment, in a state of inner peace, in self-remembering, in balance, and in total control of our emotions, mind, and sex. Why? Because only in that state our consciousness manifests itself, and only by remaining in that state can we identify all the psychological defects that want to make us react in a wrong way, leading us to make mistakes. Once we have made that logical confrontation and found what is the correct internal state in the face of that event, the next step will be to stay in a state of self-control. And we will achieve this by practicing psychological death. Observing and eliminating all the defects that manifest in our emotion and in our minds, and that wants to lead us to react in a wrong way. Thus, we can stay in self-remembering from the beginning to the end of the event. For example, we will live the event of a job interview. If we self-observe, we can discover an inner state of fear, anxiety, impatience, impotence, or on the other side, a state of idealization, a needy self manifesting in us, a self who wants to impress, etc. All those are the defects that, if we don't eliminate them, will manifest themselves in us, preventing consciousness from attending and experiencing that event. But if we practice the technique that we have learned today, we will obtain very positive experiences from any event that we live. Since by keeping ourselves in a state of balance, and in a state of consciousness, we will be able to experience the situation in the best possible way. In this way, we will be able to transcend any recurrence that should occur in that event, since we will have eliminated the psychological defect that should have acted in that recurrence. If we have the event of an argument with someone, and instead of becoming identified with the defects of anger that wants to manifest in us in that situation, we observe and eliminate all of the manifestations of our ego there, and we maintain a correct inner state. That will help us solve the situation in the best possible way, and with that, to transcend the recurrence that was marked to happen with that person. But we will also be able to extract the wisdom, the teaching that this experience came to leave us. There is something that is extremely important for us to understand, and it is the relationship that this topic has with the law of correspondences, and with the law of attraction. And that is the law that says, as it is inside, so it is outside, and the law that says that our ego attracts what is similar to its vibration. And this because, according to the internal state that we constantly have, will be the circumstances that we will attract into our lives. Since the inner life is the magnet that attracts external events, we urgently need to eliminate all wrong psychological states from our psyche. A person who admits into himself, for example, states of sadness and depression, will attract into his life situations and circumstances that led him to feel bad. People will move away from him, they will betray him, he will do badly in work, etc. But why? Because a wrong state is a magnet for misfortunes. The same if a person constantly maintains very wrong internal states such as pessimism, hatred, melancholy, self-consideration, anger, violence, etc. That person will constantly attract very difficult situations into his life. And it happens that when we admit these very wrong states in ourselves, we not only embitter our own lives, but also embitter the lives of others. But instead of reflecting on this, what we usually do is fill ourselves with self-consideration, justify ourselves, believe ourselves to be good, and thus we never change. For this reason, it is extremely important to always identify, through self-observation, when those erroneous internal states want to nest in us, or to identify, if we are already in one, to immediately eliminate them from our psyche. And something else that we must analyze in relation to this topic are the personal events. We must know that we all have personal events, which are the different hard or uncomfortable situations that happen to us. The important thing is that we understand that there are situations that we can change, and that there are others that we cannot change, and that we must learn to accept, as every situation that happens to us comes as an opportunity for us to develop the virtues and the wisdom that we now lack. There are modifiable personal events, and others that are non-modifiable. But the important thing will always be the internal state with which we face these different personal events. And this is important for us to understand, because many times we waste a lot of energy and time and we put ourselves in wrong internal states, instead of recognizing that it is a situation that we can change, and immediately focus on doing what is necessary to solve it, and maintain a correct internal state in the face of that situation. For example, we leave the house in a hurry, and once on the street, we realize that we have locked the house, leaving the keys inside. This is a personal event, which although it is certainly uncomfortable, it is certainly unpleasant, it is modifiable. If we don't apply what we learned today, what will we do? Well, we will become identified with the defects of despair or anger that start manifesting in us in the face of that situation. We will start to complain, or we can even start to fight with the partner, or blame him for having left the keys inside, and the partner blames us, and there we have a very unpleasant event. On the other hand, if we put into practice what we have learned today, the first thing we do is to self-observe ourselves. Then, observe and eliminate any psychological defect that begins to arise within us, and quickly analyze what is the correct internal state for that event. We will then realize that the correct internal state before that event is calm, understanding that it is a modifiable event, and focusing on the solution. Whether it's calling a locksmith or breaking a window glass, whatever. And we move on to solve the situation, remaining in self-control, maintaining the correct internal state until the end of the event. The second type of events are those that are non-modifiable. These are uncomfortable or unpleasant circumstances that happen to us, and that cannot be changed. For example, the death of a loved one, or of a pet, or for example, that our partner has been unfaithful to us with another person. They are things that no matter how hard we try to remedy them, they are already an immutable fact. And that is why we always tend to sink into despair, identifying terribly with the event. We enter a very wrong internal state, instead of accepting that it is something that we cannot change, and moving on to live the situation in the best possible way. The way we react to the different events in our lives will reflect the quality of the inner work we are doing. But these non-modifiable situations tend to plunge us into suffering. And those states of suffering prevent us from awakening our consciousness, and from rescuing the wisdom that this circumstance contains. And whether the situation is modifiable or not, reacting incorrectly only makes the situation worse and even tragic. People who react absurdly to any event, in a given situation, easily end up in a hospital, cemetery, or jail. A person who, for example, is faced with the event of finding his partner being unfaithful, if he fails to maintain a correct internal state, he can easily end up committing a crime. Or a person, seeing himself publicly humiliated or slandered, can react absurdly, and end up in a hospital or jail. And the problem is that we don't know how to avoid, or get out, of the suffering we get into, due to our different personal events, especially the non-modifiable ones. Therefore, let's see two aspects, which are important to keep in mind, that will help us get out of suffering. The first thing will be, not to identify yourself with the pain. This seems difficult, but we must remember that we only fall into suffering when we identify with pain. And the problem when some non-modifiable event happens to us, is that we tend to identify ourselves with pain, we feed it with negative thoughts and emotions, we give ourselves over to the defects of despair, grief, self-pity, anger, resentment, thus making the pain grow, and therefore, we cannot act consciously, nor can we learn from the experience. We must remember that consciousness doesn't suffer, consciousness observes and understands. And while pain sometimes seems inevitable, suffering is always optional. We will discover that if we do not identify with the problem that has arisen, if we do not lose ourselves in the problem, the pain disappears. So, what do we have to do? Put into practice what we have learned in this topic. Maintaining a correct state through self-observation and psychological depth. And every time pain comes to take us out of the state of harmony and serenity in which we find ourselves, we don't admit it. And we ask for the elimination of each memory, or each thought, that wants to make us suffer, of each emotion, and each sensation, so that we can continue living in the present moment, here and now. And the second thing is to reflect, so that we come to understand that everything passes. Everything we have received, at some point we will have to lose it. Everything that came, at some point will go away. Therefore, clinging to things, not wanting to let go, is absurd, and is what leads us to suffering. We must learn to see life for what it is, a movie full of scenes. When we learn to see life in this way, without identifying with its scenes, maintaining an adequate inner attitude, we will be able to learn from each event. Many would like to go to a mountain, or a monastery, to get away from the world and all its situations to achieve peace, happiness, and enlightenment. But the truth is, that only in this psychological gym, that is life itself, with all its events and circumstances, is where we have the right psychological gym to get to really know ourselves, to transform ourselves, and achieve awakening. The important thing is to understand that external events would never be as important as the way we react to them. And that the best weapon that a person can use in life is a correct psychological state. This would definitely guarantee him peace. This has been the topic we had for today. Remember to leave any questions you have, and we will gladly be answering them. I invite you to the next conference of the Psychology Pillar, in which we will be talking about our psychological country. In this, we will learn about the importance of living in the present moment, stop believing ourselves to be good people, and change our center of gravity to return to the absolute. Do not miss this interesting topic. Until next time.